She was sitting at the head of my father's dining room table the morning after we buried him. His chair. His table. His house. And she had already moved her laptop and her folders and her coffee mug into the space like she'd been waiting years for this exact moment because she had. My sister Dana looked up at me when I walked in, and she didn't even bother pretending to look sad anymore. The grief performance had lasted exactly 48 hours. Now her eyes were sharp and clear and businesslike, the way they always got when she smelled money. "There you are," she said, like I was late to a meeting I hadn't been invited to. "We need to talk about the estate." I poured myself a cup of coffee from the pot she'd made in my father's kitchen with my father's beans and sat down across from her. I didn't say anything. I've learned that silence makes people like Dana very uncomfortable, and uncomfortable people say things they shouldn't. She slid a folder across the table toward me. "I've already spoken to an estate attorney," she said. "Given that Dad didn't leave a formal will, at least not one anyone can locate, everything goes through probate. The house, the business, all of it." I looked at the folder. I didn't open it. "He did leave a will," I said. She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that meant she already knew something I didn't think she knew. "If he did, where is it?" I didn't answer that. Not because I didn't know, but because I wasn't ready yet. My father, Gerald Mercer, built Mercer Custom Millwork from nothing. He started it in a rented garage in Dayton, Ohio when I was 4 years old, cutting custom trim and cabinetry by hand with tools he bought at estate sales. By the time I was in middle school, he had 12 employees. By the time I graduated college, he had 40. It was a real business, contracts with commercial developers, a reputation that stretched across 3 states, real money. Dana had worked for the company for 6 years as the operations manager. I had not. I'd gone into teaching. 4th grade, public school, 23 kids per class. I loved it. My father respected it. Dana thought it was the dumbest decision I'd ever made. "You're walking away from all of this," she told me the summer I took the job. She gestured at the shop floor, the hum of the saws, the smell of sawdust and lacquer. "For what? $35,000 a year?" "I'm not walking away from anything," I'd said. "I'm just doing something different." She'd looked at me the way you look at someone who just told you they're going to pay for a house with lottery tickets. But my father understood. He always understood. He used to say that the point of building something wasn't to trap your kids inside it. The point was to give them the freedom to choose. He wanted me to choose. And he'd made plans for what would happen to the business after he was gone. He told me about those plans exactly once, about a year before his diagnosis. We were sitting on the back porch after dinner, watching the sun go down behind the tree line, and he'd said, quietly, "I've taken care of things, sweetheart. For both of you. I want you to know that. Whatever Dana tells you, I've taken care of things." I'd asked him what he meant. He'd reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out the old watch. His father's watch, my grandfather's. A Hamilton pocket watch from the 1940s, gold-plated, the case worn smooth from decades of handling. He turned it over in his fingers the way he always did when he was thinking. "This is going to you," he said. "Not because it's worth anything. Just because you're the one who always asked about it." I took it from him, turned it over. On the back, his father had engraved something in small, careful letters. "What's hidden holds the most value." I thought it was just a sentiment. A nice thing an old man had engraved on a watch. I didn't think about it again until the week before my father died. He'd been in hospice for 11 days by then. There were hours when he was lucid and hours when he wasn't, and during one of the lucid ones, when Dana had stepped out to take a phone call, he'd gripped my hand and said, very clearly, "The watch. Open the back panel. The secondary one. Promise me you'll do it before you sign anything." I'd promised. He died 3 days later. I opened the back panel the night after his funeral, sitting alone in my childhood bedroom with a butter knife and a flashlight. Behind the movement, behind the gears and the mainspring, there was a folded piece of paper pressed flat and thin as a whisper. I unfolded it carefully. It was a handwritten note in my father's handwriting. It said, "The will is filed with Robert Hess, Hess and Callaway, Columbus. She doesn't know. Wait until she acts. Then call Robert." I put the note back in the watch. I put the watch in my coat pocket. And I went to bed. Now, sitting across from my sister at my father's dining room table, I looked at the folder she'd pushed toward me and I thought about Robert Hess. I thought about waiting. I thought about what my father had told me. Wait until she acts. "I'll look this over," I said. She nodded, already turning back to her laptop. "I need you to sign the first form by end of week. It just acknowledges the probate process has started." I took the folder and went upstairs. That was the beginning. Over the next 3 weeks, Dana moved fast. She filed paperwork with the county, claiming she was the sole heir based on my father's absence of a formal will. She had the business's bank accounts reclassified under her personal authority as acting director. She started calling the company's biggest clients the developers and contractors who'd worked with my father for years and telling them there would be a seamless transition. She also called me, twice, to ask if I'd signed the probate acknowledgement. I said I was still reviewing it. The third time she called, her husband was on the line too. Marcus was an attorney. Not an estate attorney, he did corporate litigation, but he knew enough to be dangerous, and Dana knew how to use him like a tool. He had a very calm, very reasonable voice that he deployed the way a surgeon uses a scalpel. Precise. Bloodless. We're just trying to make sure everything is handled correctly, he said. Your sister is trying to protect the business. Protect your father's legacy. Every day this drags out is another day of uncertainty for the employees, for the clients. I understand, I said. I'm still reviewing the documents. There was a pause. Is everything okay with you? Marcus said. Dana mentioned you've seemed I don't know. Not yourself lately. The grief can really do a number on people. I felt something cold move through my chest. I recognized what that was. That was the first move. I'm fine, I said. I'll be in touch. I hung up and sat very still for a moment. Then I called Robert Hess. Robert Hess was a small, precise man in his mid-60s with reading glasses on a chain and a voice like a document being notarized. He'd been my father's attorney for 22 years. He knew exactly who I was. I was wondering when you'd call, he said. How long have you had the will? I asked. 3 years, he said. Your father was very specific about timing. He asked me to wait until you contacted me before filing anything. Why? There was a brief pause. He said, and I'm quoting him directly here, Dana will show you who she is before my daughter has to say a word. Just give her time. I closed my eyes. The will was specific and detailed and entirely legal. My father had left the house and a cash account to both of us equally. The business Mercer Custom Millwork, its assets, its contracts, its equipment, its real estate he had left to me, with a provision that Dana retain her salary and her position as operations manager for as long as she chose to remain. He wasn't punishing her. He knew what she'd do if she had full control. He'd spent 40 years watching her operate. He was protecting the employees, the clients, the thing he'd built. He was also, I understood now, protecting me by waiting to see if I needed protecting. When do we file? I asked. Whenever you say, Robert said. But I'd suggest you let me know if anything changes in the situation first. The more documentation we have of any actions taken before the will surfaces, the cleaner this is. I thought about the bank accounts she'd already reclassified. The clients she'd called. The probate paperwork she'd filed. Give me 2 more weeks, I said. Dana escalated in the second week. She called me on a Tuesday evening, and she was different this time. The business-like efficiency was gone. What replaced it was something harder and uglier. I need you to sign the paperwork, she said. I need it signed by Friday or I'm going to have to move forward without you. Move forward how? I asked. I have an offer, she said. A developer. He wants to acquire the business and the property it sits on. It's a good offer, Dana. It's more than the business is worth on paper. She'd called herself Dana. She meant me. I let it go. I'm not selling Dad's company, I said. You don't have a choice, she said. If you won't participate in the probate process, you forfeit your standing. Marcus says. Dana, I said quietly. I'm not going to sign anything. The pause that followed was very long. You know what your problem is? She said finally. You never understood what this family actually took to build. You just showed up for the holidays and the dinners and let Dad tell you how proud he was of you, and you never had to do any of the hard work. You don't deserve any of this. I didn't respond to that. I let her hear her own words sitting in the silence. I'm going to have you declared incompetent to participate in the estate process, she said. It came out fast, like she'd been holding it and finally let it go. Marcus has a doctor who will evaluate you. We can make the case that your grief has impaired your judgment. It happens. Courts recognize it. You'll be assigned a conservator and this will move forward. I kept my voice very even. I'd like to see you try. She hung up. I sat in my kitchen for a long time after that. I won't pretend it didn't shake me. Even when you know something is coming, when you've been warned, when you've watched the pattern building, there is still something deeply frightening about hearing someone who shares your blood say that out loud. Declare you incompetent. Assign you a conservator. Erase your voice from your own father's legacy. I cried that night. I called my best friend and I told her everything and I cried. I want to be honest about that because the story isn't really about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing the right thing anyway. The next morning, I called Robert Hess. She's going to try to have me declared incompetent, I said. He was quiet for a moment. Do you have that conversation recorded? I do, I said. My phone records everything. I'd started doing that 2 weeks earlier, on the advice of a friend who'd been through something similar with her own family. I'd never expected to need it this fast. Good, Robert said. Here's what I need you to do. Over the next 5 days, I went to my own doctor not because I was told to, not because Dana had arranged it, but voluntarily, independently, documented with my own records. I had a full psychological evaluation. I was, unsurprisingly, grieving. I was not impaired. I was not incompetent. I had a signed letter from a licensed clinical psychologist that said exactly that, dated and filed before Dana made her next move. I also called the developer who had made the offer on the business. His name was a name I didn't recognize. A commercial real estate acquisition group out of Cincinnati. I looked them up. They were real. I called their main line and asked to speak to someone about the Mercer Custom Millwork acquisition inquiry. The woman who came on the line sounded confused. "We don't have an active acquisition file under that name," she said. "Can you give me more details?" I gave her the details. She put me on hold for 4 minutes. "I'm sorry," she said when she came back. "I'm not finding any record of this. It's possible this inquiry came from an individual broker or a third party representing themselves as connected to us, but we haven't authorized any offer on that property." I thanked her and hung up. There was no developer. Dana had invented a buyer to pressure me into signing. She'd fabricated an offer. I called Robert. "We're ready," I said. The morning Robert filed the will with the probate court, I drove to the business. I hadn't been there in weeks. I'd been letting Dana operate under the impression that her control was complete and uncontested. I walked in through the front door at 8:15 in the morning and went directly to the conference room, where Dana was sitting with Marcus and a man I didn't recognize who turned out to be the doctor who had agreed to sign an incompetency affidavit about me without ever having met me. They looked up when I walked in. I set 3 things on the conference table. The first was a copy of the filed will, stamped by the Franklin County Probate Court. The second was a transcript of the phone call where Dana had told me she was going to have me declared incompetent. The third was a letter from my psychologist, signed and dated 4 days before Dana had scheduled this meeting. I sat down. "The will was filed this morning," I said. "Robert Hess is my father's attorney of record. He has the original. Everything you filed in probate over the last 3 weeks is now in conflict with a valid legal document." The doctor stood up very quickly and left the room without saying anything. I watched him go. I had his name. Robert already had a complaint ready to file with the medical board. Marcus was looking at his phone. His face had gone the particular shade of gray that faces go when someone realizes the structure they've built is about to fall on them. Dana was staring at me. "You knew," she said. "You knew this whole time." "Dad told me to wait," I said. "He said you'd show me who you were." "This isn't over," Marcus said. He was using his courtroom voice, the one designed to project control. "There are grounds to contest." "There are no grounds," I said. "The will is properly executed, witnessed, notarized, and filed with an attorney my father had retained for over 2 decades. The accounts you reclassified without legal authority will need to be returned. The probate filing you submitted will be contested as fraudulent, and the fabricated acquisition offer from a development group that has no record of making any such offer is documented." Marcus put his phone down. He looked at Dana. She was still staring at me. "Why didn't you just tell me?" she said. Her voice had changed. The hardness was gone. What was underneath it was something I recognized, something I'd seen in her my whole life that I'd spent years pretending wasn't there. She genuinely believed she deserved this. She genuinely could not understand how our father had chosen differently. "Because you wouldn't have heard me," I said. "You would have just found another way. I want to be clear about what happened legally, because I know people will wonder." The fraudulent probate filing was referred to the county prosecutor's office. Dana and Marcus both retained criminal defense attorneys. The doctor who had agreed to sign the incompetency affidavit without evaluation, without ever meeting me, was reported to the Ohio State Medical Board and his case was opened for review. The business accounts were restored. The clients were contacted. The employees, most of whom had no idea any of this was happening, kept their jobs. Dana retained her position as operations manager, as my father's will had specified, with the option to remain as long as she chose. She did not choose. She resigned 6 weeks later. I didn't fight it. I hired someone good, someone my father would have liked, and I let the business do what my father had built it to do. The watch is on my dresser now. I look at it every morning. What's hidden holds the most value. He'd engraved that when he was a young man, before he had children, before he had a business, before he understood just how true it was. I'm not angry at my sister. I want to be honest about that too, because I know the instinct is to expect me to be. But anger at Dana feels like spending my father's money on something he wouldn't have bought. He built that business with patience. He protected me with patience. He raised me to understand that the loudest person in the room is rarely the most powerful one. I don't rage. I don't argue. I prepare. I learned that from a man who spent 40 years cutting wood by hand and turned it into something that outlasted him. I think that's the only inheritance that ever really matters. Before I go, I want to ask you something. This community, the people who watch these videos, you come from everywhere. I know that because you always tell me. So tell me today, where are you watching from right now? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story meant something to you, if you've ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to love you, if you've ever had to be quiet when every part of you wanted to fight, I want you to know that patience is not weakness. Waiting is not losing. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply know what you have, and wait for the right moment to show it. Take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next one.